In 1989, a teenage girl named Elisa Roberson vanished from Aransas Pass, Texas, without a trace. There have been many theories through the years with this case, but two main ones stick out the most. Even though these two have been heavily highlighted by those who look into this disappearance case, they have never led investigators to discovering exactly what happened that frightful summer day. Decades have passed, but for Elisa's family, time never moved on. In this video, you'll hear directly from her sister Ruby, who I had the pleasure of speaking to, a woman who never stopped fighting for her big sister, and her mother, Marina, whose strength and hope have carried this fight for over 3.5 decades. This is a case that I have been working on for months now, and I'm eager to get into the first part of it. It really is rare that I do 2 parts on my channel, but I feel like it's appropriate for this one. With all of that being said, let's get right into it. This is the unsolved disappearance of Elisa Roberson. Blanca Elisa Roberson, who affectionately went by her middle name, was born on January 12, 1976 in Bluefields, Nicaragua, to Marina Elsa Quintana and Rufino Hurtado. In gaining a fuller understanding of Elisa's life, I believe it is essential to emphasize a particularly important chapter. There was a time when Elisa was the only source of support, strength, and stability her mother had during an incredibly challenging and complex period. At the time that Elisa was born, Nicaragua's economic climate was deeply affected by political instability, corruption, social inequality, and a growing civil conflict that eventually resulted in the Sandinista Revolution of 1979. Nicaragua was ruled by the Somoza family dictatorship from the 1930s to 1979. The regime was marked by corruption, human rights abuses, and the concentration of wealth and land in the hands of a few. Anastasio Somoza was the last in the Somoza family dynasty and was controlling the country at the time that Marina was a young first-time mother.
There was a lot of civil unrest, and my mom had talked about growing up how she was very poor. She came from a family of 12 siblings and a very poor family. I have one picture of my mom when she was about 16, and you could see the shack behind her house, and it was taken by someone who was on vacation, an American, and he took a picture of my mom, and in the background you could see the shack, and you could see the circumstances were not very good. But my mom said that her parents were very proud people. They never asked for help. They worked very hard. The one thing that my mom learned growing up was that you can be as poor as you can be, but as long as you're clean and as long as you're a decent human being, that's all that matters. What were some of the things that were very difficult living in Nicaragua?
Well, the poverty, people are really poor over there, and jobs, there's no jobs, and if you find a job, they barely pay anything. So the money that you make while you're working, that's not enough money to make a living. So anyway, it's dangerous for a girl. I find myself, since I remember, running for my life and safety, because it was almost like in every corner there was somebody waiting, or a man waiting and just trying to snatch me, and I have to run and fight. A lot of time when I won't grab, I have to fight with tooth and nails to protect myself, to free from because there have been occasions that somebody grabbed me and took me, and I have to fight really hard to free myself from that situation. So there was danger everywhere I would. There was not a time that I didn't feel that I was not in danger.
When it comes to Elisa's father, when she was only a baby, he went to find work in Costa Rica and never returned to Nicaragua. It is presumed that he is deceased. Marina then went on to meet Eugene Roberson, a man who worked for Gulf King Shrimp in South Texas and was assigned to retrieve a shrimp boat undergoing repairs in Nicaragua. Marina at the time was working at a restaurant, and of course, restaurant, food, shrimp, that's how their paths crossed. After about 2 weeks of romance, Eugene's work trip to Nicaragua was nearing an end, and it was time for him to head back to Texas. Marina and Eugene had very much fallen in love by this point, and Eugene asked her if she wanted to go with him back to the United States. Marina informed him that she had a daughter and wouldn't leave the country without her. He responded, "What kind of man would I be if I told you to leave your daughter behind?"
At the end of 2 weeks, he asked me if I would marry him. Then I told him, well, I have a baby. I said, I'm not leaving this baby behind. And he said, I will adopt the baby like if it would be my youngest. I'm sorry. He said, oh, what kind of man do you think I would be? What kind of man would I be if I would expect you to leave your baby behind?
He met, married, and adopted my sister in 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. And he came back to the States to get things ready for my mom and Elisa, and eventually sent for them. So that's how Elisa ended up here in the States. My dad adopted her, and that's how she became Elisa Roberson.
Marina was extremely excited to start this next chapter in her life, but like anyone making such an enormous move from one country to another, it wasn't easy. Marina still only spoke Spanish at this time. Moving from somewhere like Nicaragua to South Texas is a huge move. It's kind of a shock when it comes to culture. There's the language barrier, different social norms, unfamiliar food and lifestyle, the emotional reaction of being in a completely different environment. Of course, there sometimes comes the isolation of being in an area where you don't know anyone and feel like an outsider. There's just so much to it. Marina knew, though, that this was the best chance for her to give her baby girl a better future. Eugene, like anyone, had his flaws, but he adored Elisa and loved her as if she were his own flesh and blood. Elisa was known to be a very happy baby, growing up surrounded by an abundance of love. They made their home in Aransas Pass, Texas. Marina and Eugene went on to have children of their own, welcoming their daughter Ruby in 1977 and their son Tony the following year of 1978.
And so there were 3 of us little ones running around. Elisa and I were us 3 were like the 3 little musketeers. Elisa was the oldest, so of course she was like the older sister, making sure we were behaving and listening to mom. So my mom depended on Elisa a lot. My parents were just married about 3 years. My dad got himself into some trouble.
The family's stability began to unravel when Eugene found himself in serious trouble with the law and was ultimately sent to prison. His absence left a deep void, not just emotionally, but of course financially. Now, without Eugene by her side, she faced the daunting task of holding the family together all by herself. Marina worked tirelessly to make ends meet, often sacrificing her own needs to ensure her children had what they needed. From there, she found what she thought was love, and she started a relationship with a man named Ralph Gonzalez. From the start, Ralph painted himself as a caregiver, but would turn out to be one of the cruelest people that this family has ever come across. Not only someone that, as we learn a little bit more about this person in this video, you may describe them easily as being heartless, but someone who, still to this day, is a strong person of interest in this case. Ralph was heavily involved in the Mexican cartel and helped transport large supplies of narcotics to the United States through Texas from Mexico. This is something that Marina was not aware of at day one. In 1984, Ralph and Marina welcomed the birth of their son, Alex. What should have been a joyful and hopeful time for their growing family soon gave way to a much darker chapter. Beneath the surface of new beginnings, troubling patterns began to emerge, patterns rooted in Ralph's behavior. What unfolded over the following years would cast a long shadow over the household. Ralph's actions introduced turmoil and instability into their lives, leaving Marina and the children to navigate a home that at times felt more threatening than safe. Ralph was emotionally, mentally, and physically abusive. He was an angry man who took that anger out on Marina and the 4 children, one of those children even being his own. He was ruthless at times, and Marina was terrified to leave him, fearful of what he may do if she decided their relationship was over. He gave her absolutely no power in deciding the future that she wanted for her and her children.
They met, and then my little brother Alex was born in 1984, so he was about 7 years younger than me. And Ralph just became more and more abusive, very sadistic, very mean. He would beat my mom in front of us. He would tell her that he could kill her and nobody would ever find her. He would take my mom with us kids in the car and take her to different desolate places. We were from a harbor town, so he would take her to these far off places, where there was water, and he would say, I can dump your body. Nobody would ever find you. Nobody would care to look for you, and no one would ever know what happened. When I was older, I saw some pictures that some little school grade pictures that we had, and my mom wrote on the back of them saying, if something happens to me, please find me. So my mom knew she was in danger. She knew she needed to be careful. She tried to get away from him several times, but every time she did, he would always find his way back. And just kind of force himself back. There was no such thing as my mom saying, don't come back. Ralph was the type of guy he was very good at not leaving any trails. He didn't stay at one place for very long. He was into the drug, drug mule, whatever you want to call him, whatever his title was. So we would never know when he was coming or when he was going or how long he'd stay. He would stay at different places. He rarely drove a car. Made it so that if somebody wanted to find him, they wouldn't be able to find him.
Presented himself like if he was a nice person.
Oh, of course. That's
And at the
typically
beginning, he was charming. At the beginning,
Yeah.
until he showed his true colors, and he started beating me and mistreating you and the rest of the children. And by that time, when he starts showing his true color, my God, I have no way out at that time. Because he threatened me to kill me if I ever call the police or if I ever try to leave me. He said that there was not a place that I could hide, that he could not find me. At that time, when he used to beat me, and it was at night, he used to get us all in the car and he drove into wooded areas. Very scary.
I remember.
In the deserted wooded area. And same thing, I always take us back home. And I was always trying to talk him out of killing us. That was how it was. I have to beg him, take us back home.
As the eldest child, Elisa naturally stepped into the role of protector for her younger siblings. Though just a child herself, she carried a weight far beyond her years. When her siblings were frightened, it was Elisa who pulled them closer, whispering reassurance and doing her best to shield them from what they couldn't fully understand. Despite her own fears, Elisa prioritized their well-being over her own. She truly was the best big sister that they could have asked for. Elisa wasn't only an incredible sister, but she was also a phenomenal daughter. She learned English and was her mother's translator for many years. At 13 years old, when this case takes place, she was extremely mature for her age, but still young at heart, still playing with Barbies, having already entered her teen years. Elisa was a girl who always liked to laugh and smile, and she liked to make other people happy. She loved music, especially rock music. She took on a babysitting job and carefully saved every dollar until she could afford her own radio and cassette player so she could indulge in the music she enjoyed anytime that she wanted to. Elisa would spend hours listening to music on her radio and cassette player, but then MTV would come on and she would be glued to the screen. She was especially extremely captivated by music videos and just seeing these songs that she enjoyed so much come to life in visual form. She used to make friendship bracelets, and she was known to, like many in the 1980s, cuff the bottom of her jeans. Another thing about her is that she was always riding her bike. You would always see her in the neighborhood riding her bike. And of course, this was the late 1980s, so pretty much all the kids in the neighborhood were on their bikes. To Ruby, Elisa really was the epitome of cool.
So Elisa was a typical 80s. We grew up in the 80s. We were true Gen Xers. So we were watching MTV music videos, listening to Bon Jovi, Poison, Lita Ford, even New Kids on the Block. We grew up in South Texas, so we were also listening to Menudo was a big one. They were also a big one that we used to listen to. This was before Google, so we couldn't look up lyrics. So we would write down the lyrics of the songs. We would listen to the tapes over and over and over again so we can get the lyrics down and be able to sing them by heart. Elisa loved the friendship bracelets. She loved hanging out with her friends. She loved riding her bike. We would ride our bikes all the time. Elisa loved to do the peg pants. It was just really, really fun times. We would climb trees. We would catch lightning bugs at South Texas. So, we were right by the harbor. So we would ride our bikes down there. We weren't supposed to be, but we did. So we really had a lot of fun, and Lisa was 13, so she was finally at the age where, I was becoming more of a pain in the butt. Even though I wanted to hang out with her, she was cool. So we were in the same grade. She was held back a year. So we grew up kind of with just a big group where we just all hung out, and there was no distinction, oh, these are my friend, and these are yours. But when she turned 13 was when she was, she had a boyfriend. She wanted to hang out with her friends. We loved going to the movies. So Elisa was just funny. The things that she would say were just hilarious. She would do some crazy things. She was tough. If she was very street smart. If anybody was picking on her little siblings, she would beat them up, tell them to leave us alone, to tell you to knock it off, if you were not behaving right. So we did a lot of, it was a fun summer. That summer was really fun. It was, we did have there was some sadness, but how I explain a lot of times is in the sadness and the hard times, we kind of became closer, because it was just a lot of some hard things in our family that were going on.
There might not be a lot of times in this video that I smile because, of course, there's really nothing to smile about when it comes to this case, but it's hard not to feel a little bit of joy when I go over the characteristics of Elisa and the way that she was described to me by her sister. Like I did say at the beginning of this video, I did speak to Ruby for my work, and I was originally reached out to by Ruby to cover her sister's case. And when she talks about her sister, you can tell, of course, it's very bittersweet because she doesn't have her sister today, but there's just such a heartwarming feeling that you can tell comes over her when she starts thinking back to who her sister was before all of this happened, who she was before the day of her disappearance, all of the things that she remembered before that happened. Because yes, the point of this video is to spread the word of this case even more. It's the case at the forefront, but we have to remember that behind every case is still a person. It's a person who had an entire life outside of what happened to them.
I was watching a podcast a couple of days ago, and something that the podcaster had talked about was that how families will talk about their loved one when asked to talk about their story. They'll start the day that their loved one went missing, and how a lot of times the person, their lives, how they grew up, all of that kind of gets overlooked because we're so focused on the day they went missing and everything that has transpired since they went missing. And I found myself that happening a lot with me, where I sometimes forget about that she was a person, and because we're so hyper focused on the case, and we're so hyper focused on fighting and fighting for answers, getting justice, and fighting the red tape, the bureaucracy, and all the other things that we have to deal with as families of missing loved ones, that we forget. And sometimes I have to sit still and remember, Elisa was my sister, and we had a whole life, before she went missing, before August 6, 1989.
Elisa truly was a bright light in her loved ones' lives, a source of fun, warmth, and absolutely unforgettable memories. They are moments still remembered with fondness, even as they stand in stark contrast to the tragedy that would soon unfold. Now, the summer leading up to her disappearance was one filled with many memorable moments, some good and unfortunately some bad.
My mom was finally able to break it off with Ralph, so he wasn't coming out as much to the house. And so we were finally finding some relief in being able to live life without the fear of Ralph always showing up. Well, we still kept seeing him around. And that summer, there were a couple times Elisa was where we'd see him and we'd run. Elisa would be with Alex one time, and they ran to a neighbor's house and said, can you call my mom? My dad, or Alex said, my dad's trying to take us. So, that summer we were on guard. We were hyper alert. And we knew Ralph was dangerous. He made threats to my mom. He threatened to kill her several times. And he threatened that he could hide her body. Nobody would ever find her. He threatened to do something to her that she would always remember him by. So there was a lot going on that summer.
At this time, Ralph wasn't around as much, but he was lurking. He did, on one occasion, tell Marina that he would hurt her in a way that she would never forget, which we have to, of course, question now. Did that possibly mean that he would target one of her children? We cannot be certain of that, but what we do know is that summer of 1989 was this family's last summer with Elisa. Now we get into the day of Elisa's disappearance, Sunday, August 6th of 1989. At around 5:30 p.m. this day, Elisa arrived back home from a sleepover at her friend Charla's home, and Charla and Elisa spent the entire day together until Elisa went home that evening. Usually on Sunday, they would hop on the bus and head to church later in the day. It was the first Assembly of God church in town, but on this Sunday, Elisa decided to skip church. The bus stopped to pick her and Charla up at around 5:20 p.m. outside Charla's home, and as Charla got on the bus, Elisa told her that she was going to simply head home instead, and that's exactly what she did. Elisa's family was a bit surprised that she skipped out on church that evening, but didn't question it too much. Just as Elisa was settling in for the night, though, the phone rang, and it was Elisa's friend, Debbie Green. Elisa tells her mother that it's Debbie, and Debbie wants to know if she can come over and play. Marina told Elisa that it was getting a bit late in the evening and she should just stay home for the night. Debbie told her, though, that she would meet her at Keyburger Elementary School, which was a point between both their homes. The school was only about a 6-minute walk from the Roberson home and an 11-minute walk from the Green home that resided at 215 South 11th Street. Debbie said her father, Robert Earl Green, known as Bob Green, would even drive her home so she didn't have to walk alone in the dark. Marina agreed to let her go, and within minutes, Elisa was out the door on her way to the school to meet Debbie. What her family didn't know, though, was that when she stepped out of their home at 431 South Whitney Street that evening, it would be the last time they would ever see her. According to Ruby, Elisa left the home at around 5:45 p.m. At the time, she was wearing a light blue Mickey Mouse t-shirt, dark blue shorts, and sneakers. A little bit of time later, though, after Elisa left the home, Debbie called back and Ruby answered the phone. I do need to mention that if you've listened to any podcast episodes or YouTube videos on this case, Marina believed the time between Elisa leaving the home and Debbie calling was probably between 20 to 30 minutes. Only recently, she has stated that she thinks the time was actually more toward an hour. We must take into consideration that on a normal day, when nothing stressful is even going on, it's very easy to lose track of time. It's incredibly easy to lose track of time during a day that is very stressful. This is known. August 6th of 1989 would be one of the most heartbreaking days of Marina's life, so we must give her a little bit of grace when it comes to not knowing the exact time that Debbie Green called back. When Debbie called, though, Ruby remembers feeling a bit annoyed. She doesn't know if she and Elisa were in some sort of normal sister fight at the time, or if she was just annoyed by Debbie because Debbie was one of those characters that just kind of annoyed her on the regular, but she remembers feeling a bit of annoyance during the phone call. Debbie informed Ruby that she went to the school and Elisa wasn't there. Ruby told her, she's got to be there. You probably just missed her. You know what, Debbie? I don't know, and I don't care. Of course, today, with everything that would happen, Ruby extremely regrets saying that, but how could she have possibly known at the time what was going to transpire from all of this?
She was only going to walk halfway, and Debbie was going to meet her there, and then her dad bring her home. So that was good. So I said, okay. I said, you can go. Later, I don't know, and I thought a long time had passed by, maybe like close to an hour, when the phone rang again. And you answer it again, and you got a little, you got a little mad because it was Debbie again. So you say, it's Debbie again, and I heard you talking to her, and then you say, Mom, Debbie is looking for Elisa, and I panic. I yell, and
Remember,
I
you were
say,
in the kitchen.
Elisa. Yeah, I yell, panic. Elisa is supposed to tell her Elisa is supposed to be with her by now. And I panic because I think it was closer to an hour by the time she made that second call. So that's what I panic. That's what I say. Elisa is supposed to be with her.
Marina, though, being a mom, took it serious from the first moment and told Ruby while she was on the phone, Elisa should be with Debbie right now. If she wasn't with Debbie, where could she be? Debbie was with another friend named Sarah at this time as well, and said that they were going to head back to the school again and look for Elisa. Elisa was someone who had a ton of friends in the neighborhood. Maybe she just got caught up chatting with one of them somewhere. Maybe she was on a side street. They were going to go look for her again. Sometime later, Debbie called back and says, again, Elisa isn't at the school, and they saw her nowhere on their way there. This is when true panic sets in for everyone. Debbie told them that her dad should be home soon and would have him drive them around the neighborhood to look for her. As I'm sure many of you are questioning right now, were there any witnesses who saw Elisa on her way to Keyburger Elementary School on the day of her disappearance? And the answer is yes. When Ruby was calling friends in the area, she spoke to a neighbor, Jennifer, who had actually seen Elisa while she was outside with her little brother, Nathan. And Nathan was actually, at the time, a bit of a crush of Elisa's. Nathan was outside cleaning out the family camper along with his father, Tom Pierce, and sister, Jennifer. They all saw Elisa walk by, and Jennifer asked her if she wanted to possibly help her plant flowers. Elisa told her that she was on her way to meet Debbie at Keyburger Elementary School. Elisa was told by them to have fun, and then she was on her way. Not too much later, Bob Green called. Ruby handed the phone to her mother, and Bob told Marina not to call the police just yet, that they're going to look for Elisa around the neighborhood. A little bit of time later, Bob showed up to the Roberson home and asked if Elisa had made it home yet. They informed him that she hadn't. He told Marina at that point that they definitely needed to phone authorities. The original phone call to the Aransas Pass Police Department that day regarding Elisa's disappearance was made by Ruby at 9:49 p.m. Ruby told them, quote, "My sister hasn't come home yet, and my mom wants the policeman to come over." Officer Winkle visited the Roberson residence that night and took the initial report. According to Ruby, he didn't seem to take the situation very seriously, suggesting Elisa might have just been with friends. He left and told them that she would probably be home soon. But the following morning, Marina, accompanied by her 3 children, went to the police station to check whether any efforts had been made to locate Elisa during the night.
I didn't know it at the time, but it was Officer Winkle was the one who came out. He took the report. We told him when we had seen Elisa last. He said that, maybe she went to stop to talk to one of her friends and she'll be home, just let us know if she doesn't come home. So that whole night was the most horrible night of my life. That is something, a fear, a terror, a dread, a doom that I hope I never, ever have to feel that again. But that was an awful night. My mom and I were up all night looking out of the window. We periodically would go out into the yard, just kind of look to see if we could see her down the street. We'd look out the window. I kept thinking any minute now she'll come walking down our driveway, and she never did. And we got no sleep. My mom laid out on the couch in the living room, and that next morning, before the day could get started, we were getting over to the police department. We didn't have a car, but the police department was close by, so we walked. All of us, all the kids. My mom took us all.
I said that I thought they're looking for her. And I didn't even want to call back and say, did you all find her? Because in my mind, I thought I do not want to interfere. They're looking for Elisa. And I thought all that night they were looking for her. And I was there waiting, thinking, well, they're looking for her. And my God, I find out 35 years later that nobody was looking for her. That's horrible.
It is, and what
That is horrible.
Mike Thompson said that they did patrol, they did do some patrolling, but it wasn't like he was saying, not enough was done. It was just probably they patrolled a little bit and that was it.
Marina and the children remained at the station for quite some time, hoping to make some progress in locating Elisa. Lieutenant Linda Thompson was the first officer to speak with her that day. As the head of the juvenile division, Lieutenant Thompson should have been notified immediately about any case involving a missing minor, but she wasn't. That was actually her first time hearing that Elisa was missing.
She didn't know about it until as we're walking in, she's getting the report. And she knew something was wrong because Elisa was always with my mom. She was her translator. And everywhere we went, Elisa was there. If my mom had to go to an important, doctor appointments, the state building, the police department, Elisa was with her. Elisa had to help my mom. And so Linda already knew that something was wrong.
For days and then weeks, police officers and detectives were in and out of the Roberson home. Search and rescue command centers were established, and officers went door to door asking neighbors if they had seen Elisa. This is when authorities spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Barker. The Barkers lived next door, and they told authorities that they had been washing dishes and both saw Elisa leaving her house the night she went missing. Their kitchen window actually faced the Roberson home, so they were able to see her clear as day. She was there leaving the home, and of course they didn't know at the time that she was heading to the school, but they did see her. When it comes to the initial search, Ruby recalls that friends, family, and neighbors gathered at the house almost daily, all asking how they could help, if there was anything that any of them could do. Bloodhounds and cadaver dogs were brought in to search the areas surrounding the home. Police collected some of Elisa's belongings to provide the dogs with her scent. A bloodhound named Clementine, along with other scent dogs, tracked her scent to the intersection of South 8th Street and West Goodnight Avenue. This location is just slightly beyond the school. So at that point, that is when her scent is gone, and most assume that that is the point that she must have gotten into a vehicle. Whose vehicle that is, We don't know. They even, for a period of time, brought in helicopters so they could scour overhead and see if they could locate anything, even just any of Elisa's belongings, but they were unable to. The main initial search for Elisa had family and friends combing alleyways and looking in dumpsters, desperate to find any sign of her. Ruby's father, Eugene, was out working on a shrimp boat in the Gulf of Mexico when he received the devastating news that Elisa was missing. Though not her biological father, he loved and treated her as his own. As soon as he got off the boat, he began searching tirelessly, even traveling to Mexico in hopes of finding her. Both Eugene and Marina, I do have to mention, were quickly cleared of any involvement in Elisa's disappearance.
My mom and dad were beside themselves. Like, I've never heard the type of cries that I heard that came out of my mom and dad. The pain was visceral. The crying and the sadness and the horribleness of that whole nightmare is just something that, again, I never want to relive, and I never want to have to feel that pain again. But my parents were just beside themselves and devastated, and my mom couldn't sleep. She said for the first time in her life, she felt like she just wanted to die. She wanted to die. Because it was just too hard to be here. My dad, the best way that he could figure out how to help in all of this was to just go looking for her. He went looking, it's South Texas is a border town, so he went down to Mexico. He went looking for her. He went looking for Ralph. There just was a lot going on. There was a lot of things we didn't know what were happening at the time until 35 years later. We're just finding out some of the things that were happening. Mike and Linda Thompson, there was a lot they were doing at that time. And, granted, hindsight's always 20/20. There's things you can look back and think, this should have been done, but I think they did the very best they could. And Elisa was not just to them, they were doing everything that they could, and it was as if Elisa was their daughter.
Early in the investigation, though, the lead detectives, Linda and Mike Thompson, who are married, had already identified a main person of interest, Bob Green, the father of Debbie Green. Why would they look at Bob, though? Well, one thing, small but worth mentioning, is that on the day of Elisa's disappearance, Bob, Debbie, and Sarah showed up with ice cream, something Ruby found unsettling. It seemed out of place considering a child was missing. In the midst of a child being missing and no one knowing where they are, who would think to go grab ice cream?
They were eating ice cream and they had one for Elisa. So I thought that was strange. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they know that Elisa is, what did they thought? Did they thought that Elisa was going to be at home? I don't know.
Sometimes I think it was as innocent as that, but then other times I think if there's a child missing, we're helping to find a child that nobody can.
The last thing in mind is
ice
food,
cream.
ice cream, right?
Yes, yes.
And they were supposed to be looking for Elisa, not going to the store buying ice cream. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I remember early on Bob Green becoming upset and storming out of the police station. And I couldn't understand it at the time why he was so upset. But looking back, I think maybe Linda was asking him questions that were making him uncomfortable.
Now, one thing about Elisa is that she would have never gone with someone she didn't know. But one person that she did trust was Bob. Where was Bob, though, when she went missing? At the time of her disappearance, Bob claimed he had fallen asleep in his car at his metal shop located behind a property near Goodnight and 11th Street, just 3 blocks from where Elisa had been headed. It's not impossible to fall asleep in a car, we've all done it, but given the heat that day, the interior of the car would have reached temperatures well over 120 degrees. There is just no way that someone would have been able to so casually fall asleep in a vehicle with the temperature that high inside of it on a hot summer day in Texas. Something else is that further down the line in 1991, Bob was actually charged with indecency with a child. Even Debbie's mother, Bob's wife, later admitted she believed Bob could have been involved in Elisa's disappearance, stating that everyone thinks he's such a good guy, but he's not the man everyone thinks he is. Bob, though, is only one suspect in Elisa's case. The other one is someone that may not surprise you at all, and that is Ralph, Marina's ex-boyfriend and Alex's father. As we discussed before, Ralph was involved in illegal activity. He knew very dangerous people. He had recently been in the area, threatened Marina's life more than once, and told her he would do something to her that she would never forget. Ralph Gonzalez was the main person Marina thought could have taken Elisa. She pushed this theory to authorities and they eventually looked into it, but they claimed that he couldn't have been in Texas recently because he was actually in a prison in Mexico. The chief and detective sergeant went to Mexico together and they stated that they saw Ralph in person. They verified he was in there and had been there since way before her disappearance. The Roberson family, though, when they heard this, they didn't know what to think. They were sure, they were positive that they had seen him that summer in Aransas Pass and he had followed Elisa. Elisa told her mother that on the regular, she felt like she was being followed, besides the one time she was sure he had been following her and her younger brother, Alex. In the time leading up to Elisa's disappearance, Marina actually believed that Ralph was going to abduct their son, Alex. So she had been watching Alex like a hawk for months. She stated, and this was something that she later told authorities, that she actually ran into Ralph in the parking lot of a local store and ran away from him as fast as she could. Marina had called authorities before on Ralph for illegal activity, but she was desperate to have them look at him for the disappearance of her daughter. Her goal was to have authorities just stop looking at Bob Green for a little bit of time and focus their attention on Ralph and see if they could uncover anything.
It was at home morning. I was so scared. I was like in a cave hiding in the house because I was scared. I was so scared that the person that took Elisa, and I thought it was Ralph, because he told me so many times, one of these days, I'm going to hurt you like nobody has before. This was his word.
That's
like nobody has before. You will remember me for the rest of your life. And not only that, but he used to say, and you know what, you're going to talk and people will not listen to you. They will think that you're crazy. God, they will not believe you.
Marina was so desperate to have them look at Ralph that she actually sent an anonymous letter to them and snipped letters out of magazines for it. Linda Thompson, not long after, came over to the Roberson home, though, and found the tore up magazines in the trash and asked Marina why she would do such a thing. Marina, though, we have to remember, was a mother that just wanted to find her daughter and thought that her abusive ex-boyfriend was the one responsible. She just wanted someone, anyone, especially someone of authority, to listen to her.
And so my mom very early on had told them that they needed to look at Ralph. And so that's where that came about is the threats that he made to my mom. And they were very real threats, and he was dangerous. He was very dangerous. And I don't know that people really realized, we were speaking from experience. It wasn't just something there was not a kind of a lover's spat or anything like that. This was from experience. And when you're looking for your child, you're going to go back and replay everything and say, what happened, what's been going on.
The Roberson family still today is certain that Ralph was in the area of Aransas Pass that summer. Could authorities have been mistaken? That is unknown, but there are definitely differing views and opinions when it comes to Ralph Gonzalez and Bob Green. What we do know, though, is that the Green family started to distance themselves from the Robersons soon after the disappearance. Marina never wanted to believe Bob could have been responsible because They were such great friends. The Green family, though, put up a wall between them and the Robersons, which, when you look at something like this, could this have just been because Bob knew his story looked a bit suspicious and wanted to prevent himself from doing something else to put more eyes on him? Or was it a guilty conscience? People still ask themselves that question today. At its core, this case is built on one thing: questions. So many questions and, frustratingly, few answers. As the investigation unfolded, more potential sightings began to surface. One came from a boy named Elijah, a neighbor and schoolmate of Elisa's, who also attended the same church. He claimed he saw Elisa getting into a car the day she vanished. The vehicle? A red or maroon two-door sedan. Another witness named Floyd echoed this account, saying he too saw her enter a similar vehicle that day. This lead, though, regarding the car was unfortunately never really pursued, but it was verified that both Elijah and Floyd allegedly saw her enter this car around the exact same spot that the sniffer dogs lost her scent near the school. We unfortunately don't know much else when it comes to the car, but what we do know is that Bob Green didn't drive a red or maroon vehicle, and Ralph, he didn't even own a car. Could it have been someone Ralph knew and sent them to pick up Elisa? Authorities stated that the prison that he was in at the time was on lockdown, that nothing, not even information, was getting in or out, that even if he had a desire or plan to send somebody to the area to abduct Elisa to hurt Marina, that it just wasn't possible. Along with so many questions, this case, like so many other cold cases, also has its fair share of rumors. One that is commonly brought up, and you can even find it on the page for Elisa's case on the Charlie Project, is that a friend of hers stated that on the day that she vanished, she was moody and not being herself.
As far as Elisa, I have heard things about her being moody, and that's always bothered me, really bothered me, because when Elisa came home, she was acting her normal self. There was nothing of her being moody. My mom and her did not fight. I was there. There was no fight. There was no disagreement. I had talked to Linda Thompson and asked her about that, specifically about those people saying she was moody. And she says, I don't know where that came from, because nobody ever mentioned to us, neither her best friend or her best friend's mom or anyone else that they talked to who had actually interacted with Elisa. None of them had said she was being moody, acting moody or strange. They said she just came home, decided she didn't want to go to church, which happens to all of us. I can make plans to go somewhere and at the last minute decide I don't want to go. So she came home, and I remember Debbie called us and asked if Elisa could come back. And she was a 13-year-old kid who doesn't want to maybe, go back out if another friend says, hey, you want to hang out? So, that's always bothered me.
There are so many aspects of this case that will leave you scratching your head, but believe me, it's only the beginning of the baffling oversights in this case. If you want to hear more about this case, make sure to stay tuned for part 2. In this video, we discussed Elisa's backstory, the day of her disappearance, and some of what happened in the short time afterward. In the next video, we'll be exploring the years that followed. We'll cover more information about Bob Green and Ralph Gonzalez, a former family acquaintance who shockingly turned on them with fabricated claims that have since been proven false, a set of remains located in 2020 near Aransas Pass, and how authorities began targeting a grieving family instead of helping them. We'll also reveal a surprising suspect, someone no one would have ever suspected, with no clues pointing to their involvement at all. Finally, we'll take a look at where the case stands today. I hope you'll join us for part 2.